I was quietly planning my escape for weeks while he mocked my pregnancy and stole my name to open secret accounts. Then he left for a weekend trip and came home to an empty apartment and a legal nightmare. I was 6 months pregnant, bent over with a mop in one hand and a swollen ankle in the other, trying to keep our living room from turning into a swimming pool, while my husband Bryce sat on the couch, surrounded by beer cans, laughing with his friends about how women always overreact. The ceiling had leaked from a busted upstairs pipe. Water was pouring down onto our living room rug like a faucet someone forgot to turn off. I had towels shoved everywhere, under the TV stand, across the kitchen threshold, around the legs of the crib we hadn't even assembled yet. Bryce hadn't lifted a finger, not to help, not even to check what was going on. He was too busy showing his friends the new crypto setup he just invested in, funded, of course, by money from our joint account. Without asking. I slipped once, caught myself on the edge of the coffee table, and let out a gasp. That was the first time Bryce actually looked over. "You okay?" he asked with a smirk, not moving from the couch. His best friend Corey chuckled. "She's fine, bro. She's built like a linebacker now. Ain't nothing gonna take her down." The laughter that followed hit harder than the fall. I didn't say anything. I just kept mopping, pressing the towel harder into the floor so they couldn't see my hands shaking. My shirt clung to my skin from sweat. The baby kicked, hard, and I whispered under my breath, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm trying." After 20 more minutes, the water had mostly stopped dripping and I'd gotten the worst of it cleaned. I sat down carefully on the edge of the armchair, every joint in my body throbbing. Bryce turned to look at me, still holding a beer, and said, "This wouldn't have happened if you knew how to handle the landlord instead of nagging him about stupid crap." I stared at him. My mouth opened, then closed again. There was so much I wanted to say, but nothing that felt safe. Not in front of his friends, not when I could barely breathe from the pain in my back, not when I felt more alone than I had in my entire life. That's when Corey spoke again. "Damn, Bryce. You better hope she bounces back after that baby, man. She's starting to look real different." He said it like a joke. Bryce laughed. They both laughed. And I smiled. I don't know why I smiled. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe I'd spent so long pretending things were fine that my face had stopped needing permission. But inside, I broke. I excused myself, walked into the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I stared at myself in the mirror. My belly, round and heavy. My face, puffy from pregnancy and tears. My eyes, hollow. That was the moment I realized I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She looked like a stranger trapped in someone else's life. I ran the water in the sink to drown out the sound of me crying, and somewhere between the sobs and the sink and the fluorescent light that made everything look worse, I felt something shift, something deep and quiet and final. I wasn't mad about the joke, or the mess, or even the complete lack of help. Not anymore. I was mad because I knew this was never going to change. Bryce hadn't slipped up. He hadn't had a bad day. This was him. This had always been him. And I had been too tired, too scared, too hopeful to admit it. I washed my face, dried it with a paper towel, and walked out like nothing happened. Sat down next to them and asked if anyone wanted more beer. Bryce didn't even look at me when he said, "Yeah, grab a few." I nodded, walked into the kitchen, and while I was in there, I opened the drawer where we keep the bills and found something that made my blood go cold. A bank statement from an account I didn't know existed in my name, and it was maxed out. Over $7,000 in charges, mostly crypto transfers, gaming equipment, and streaming subscriptions I'd never heard of. My hands were shaking as I held it, and that's when I knew. He wasn't just lazy, he was stealing from me. And I had no idea how far it had already gone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, that bank statement clutched in my hand like a burning brand. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those charges. $1,299 to a streaming PC store, $799 to some sketchy crypto site, 5 separate Uber Eats orders, each over $100. all in my name, from an account I never even knew existed. I should have woken Bryce up and demanded an explanation, but I didn't, because I already knew what he'd say. "You're being dramatic." I was going to pay it off. "Why do you always assume the worst of me?" I'd heard it all before, and somehow, despite everything, I wasn't surprised. I was just hollow. The next morning, Bryce woke up around 11 a.m., came into the kitchen rubbing his eyes and yawning like he was the one who hadn't slept. I was standing at the stove, making scrambled eggs because my doctor said I needed more protein. I'd thrown up twice already. He kissed me on the top of the head like nothing was wrong and said, "Sorry about the mess yesterday. You know Corey gets out of pocket sometimes." Corey. Not him. Not what he'd said. Not the flood or the mop or the credit card in my name. Corey. I turned off the stove, slid the eggs onto a plate, and said, "I found something yesterday." He didn't look up from his phone. "Yeah?" "There's a card, in my name, one I never opened, and it's maxed out." That got his attention. He looked up, face blank for just a second too long, then forced a chuckle. "Oh, that. Yeah, I was gonna tell you. It's just easier to get approved with your credit, you know. I was gonna take care of it." I stared at him. "You used my name, my credit, without telling me." He shrugged. "You make such a big deal out of everything. It's not like I'm buying drugs or something." He walked out of the kitchen like that was the end of it. Like he hadn't just committed fraud. Like I was the one being unreasonable for bringing it up. I stood there, plate in hand, the eggs going cold, and something inside me snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the plate. I calmly walked to the bathroom, shut the door, and vomited until there was nothing left but bile. Later that afternoon, I started spotting, then cramping, then blood. I called my doctor in a panic. She told me to come in immediately. Bryce didn't offer to drive me. He said, "Well, you've been stressed lately. Maybe try being more positive." I drove myself, hands shaking the whole way. By the time I got to the clinic, I was having trouble walking from the pain. They rushed me in, hooked me up to monitors, did an ultrasound. The baby's heartbeat was still strong, thank God. But my blood pressure was through the roof, and I was severely dehydrated from vomiting. The spotting, they said, was likely due to stress and strain. I was officially classified as a high-risk pregnancy. I spent 6 hours at the hospital. Bryce didn't call, didn't text. When I got home, he was on the couch, headset on, playing some shooting game and yelling at his teammates. When he finally noticed me, he paused the game, not to ask if I was okay, but to say, "You're making things really difficult lately." I stood there in the doorway, purse still on my arm, discharge papers in hand, and I realized he didn't care if I lived or died. He didn't care if the baby made it. He didn't even ask what the doctor said. I didn't reply. I just went into the bedroom, locked the door, and curled up in bed. And that's when I opened my email and saw a message from our landlord, a forwarded notice from the building's insurance office. Apparently, the burst pipe wasn't from upstairs. It had come from our own bathroom, a leaking valve Bryce had fixed himself weeks ago. The same valve I told him to call a plumber about, the one he told me not to nag him about again. He'd lied. The flood wasn't bad luck. It was his fault, and he let me clean up his mess, while pregnant, just so he could avoid looking like the idiot who caused it. And then it hit me. This wasn't just neglect. This was deliberate, calculated, manipulative. And I had no idea how deep it went yet. The night after the hospital visit, I couldn't stop thinking about that email from our landlord. The flood wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. It was Bryce's fault. And instead of owning up to it, he let me, 6 months pregnant, crawl on my hands and knees to clean it, just so he could save face. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, the baby's tiny kicks pulsing against my ribs like little warning taps. I kept hearing his voice. "You're making things really difficult lately." No concern, no guilt, not even the decency to pretend he cared. That was the night I stopped crying, not because I wasn't hurt anymore. God, I was. But because something inside me had gone eerily calm. And when I'm calm, I'm dangerous. The next morning, I went out and bought a notebook. I labeled it Exit Plan. Every day after that, I added to it, bank statements, photos, timestamps of his outbursts. I downloaded an app that lets you record conversations from your phone discreetly. I started documenting everything. The more I paid attention, the more I realized how deep the rot went. Bryce wasn't just lazy. He was cruel in small daily doses. Death by 1,000 cuts. He'd scoff when I groaned getting up from the couch. Roll his eyes when I said the baby's kicks were getting stronger. Tell me I was lucky he hadn't left yet because most guys wouldn't put up with this kind of drama. A few days later, he invited 3 of his friends over for a guys' night. He didn't ask if I was okay with it. Just texted me, "Order some pizzas before they get here. I want pepperoni and extra wings." When they arrived, I was in the bedroom trying to nap. My lower back had been in spasm for hours. I'd barely slept the night before, but Bryce banged on the door anyway. "Hey," he barked. "You're not seriously gonna sleep all night, right? Can you come out here and be sociable for once?" For once. I came out, looking like death warmed over, wearing the only clean, oversized hoodie I could still fit into. He took one look at me and laughed. His friends laughed too. Then Bryce said, right in front of them, "You know what's funny? She used to be hot. Now she just kind of waddles around like dead weight." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just walked to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and smiled. Because I had my phone in my pocket, and it was recording. Later that night, after they left and the living room looked like a frat house exploded, I sat down and listened to the recording. I labeled the file Dead Weight, April 3rd. It was the 3rd audio file I'd saved that week. That's when I knew this wasn't just preparation. This was evidence. I had no doubt that once I left, Bryce would spin the story. He'd call me unstable, ungrateful, maybe even try to fight for custody just to punish me. But I was going to be ready. I was going to walk out clean, with proof, and a plan. And just when I thought I was starting to get ahead of him, I found the letter. It was tucked in a pile of unopened mail next to the modem, mixed with junk ads and old pizza coupons. It was addressed to Bryce Jensen, from the county clerk's office, marked confidential. I opened it because I had every right to, and what I saw nearly made me drop to the floor. It was a petition for divorce, filed 2 weeks ago. Filed by him, without telling me, without saying a word, while I was still pregnant. He wasn't just trying to wear me down emotionally. He was planning to legally ambush me, and based on the documents inside, he was already requesting full custody of the baby and the rights to the apartment. He was trying to beat me to the finish line, and he had no idea I was 5 steps ahead of him. After finding the divorce papers Bryce secretly filed, I didn't panic. I felt something colder, focused, dangerous, clear. He'd been planning to blindside me for weeks, maybe longer. He wanted to frame it like he was the one leaving, like he was the victim stuck with a hormonal, lazy, deadweight wife. He probably thought I'd crumble under legal pressure, that I'd beg, grovel, settle for crumbs just to keep my head above water. He had no idea who he married. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Yes, my lawyer. I'd secretly retained her 2 weeks ago, and she'd already started building a file with all the documentation I'd collected. I sent her the copy of Bryce's petition and the audio recording from Dead Weight Night. Her response was immediate. "We're flipping this on him. You don't run. We make him run." We filed a countersuit that afternoon, my own petition for divorce, citing verbal abuse, financial fraud, and emotional neglect. With evidence, recordings, medical reports, a paper trail. And then I did something bold. I went home that night, acted like nothing had changed, and kissed Bryce on the cheek while he microwaved leftover wings. He smirked. "Feeling better?" he asked. I smiled back. Much. Inside, I was calculating every next move. Over the next 3 days, I slowly moved important documents to my sister's place. Birth certificate, insurance cards, my passport, the baby's ultrasound records. I started packing small things, my clothes, my laptop, sentimental photos, and storing them in labeled boxes in the trunk of my car. I changed the login credentials for all accounts that were under my name, only. Bank accounts, credit monitoring, my email. Bryce didn't notice. He was too busy planning a guy's trip to Miami before the baby ruins everything. He actually said that out loud. Twice. Then, the twist. On Friday morning, I got a call from the credit bureau. They were following up on a second card that had been flagged for unusual activity. Another card, also in my name. I asked for a copy of the application. They sent it over within the hour. My stomach dropped, because the address on the application wasn't our current apartment. It was for a one-bedroom loft downtown. Bryce had rented an apartment in secret using my name and credit, while still living with me, while still eating the food I cooked and sleeping in the bed I paid for. The application listed him as the sole occupant, his contact number, his signature, my identity. He was setting up a bachelor pad. He was planning to move out without warning, file for divorce, take the baby, and disappear. He was going to leave me with debt, legal chaos, and a broken apartment. I couldn't even cry, because the rage inside me was hotter than grief, sharper than heartbreak. This wasn't just betrayal, it was warfare, and I'd already won the first battle. Because what Bryce didn't know was that I'd already emptied our joint account. A slow, methodical siphoning over 2 months, small amounts just under his radar. I'd only ever put money in, never taken it out. Until now, I'd reclaimed every cent I'd contributed. My lawyer said it was legal. He said it was smart. And tomorrow, while Bryce left for his guys' weekend, thinking he was 2 steps ahead, I would be gone. Not just gone. I would take back my life, my peace, my baby, and leave him with exactly what he deserved, nothing. The morning Bryce left for his guys' trip was surprisingly uneventful. He barely looked up from his phone as he packed, too distracted texting his friends and complaining about flight times. I was sitting at the kitchen table in an oversized hoodie, sipping tea, playing the part he expected me to play. Quiet, worn out, submissive. Before walking out the door, he tossed over his shoulder, "Don't do anything crazy while I'm gone. I'll be back Sunday. Try not to burn the place down." I smiled. The door clicked shut, and I exhaled for the first time in months. Operation Leave and Never Look Back was officially in motion. Within 15 minutes, my sister pulled up in front of the building with a van. She brought Mia, my oldest friend, and even Bryce's own cousin Leo, who had quietly reached out 2 weeks ago after overhearing Bryce brag about ditching his whale of a wife once the baby came. Apparently, Leo had been disgusted and wanted to help. I believed him. We moved fast. Every item on my inventory list went out the door like clockwork. Baby essentials I'd bought myself, my laptop, important documents, sentimental gifts, my grandmother's jewelry, everything that mattered to me and my child. I left behind the couch Bryce insisted on getting, the dishes he never washed, and the TV he bought using my credit card. By sunset, the apartment was hollow, and I finally felt full. I left a manila envelope on the kitchen counter, neatly sealed and centered like a parting gift. Inside were a copy of the divorce papers from my lawyer, a bank summary showing the final balance of our joint account, $0, 0 cents credit card statements filed under my name, marked as fraud, a USB drive of voice recordings, every insult, every cruel laugh, every moment he thought I'd never remember, a printed screenshot of the rental agreement for his secret apartment, signed using my name. And finally, a single handwritten note. "You told me not to do anything crazy, so I did something smart instead. I didn't tell him where I was going, didn't leave a forwarding address. My number was already changed, my email wiped clean. That night, I sat on the floor of my new apartment, bare but safe, with a frozen pizza and a playlist of songs I used to love before he turned everything into noise. I didn't cry. I watched the silence wrap itself around me like a blanket, and for the first time in years, I let it. Bryce came home 2 days later to an empty apartment. According to Leo, he walked in calling my name like I'd just stepped out for coffee. Then he saw the envelope. He went silent for an entire minute. Then he started throwing things. I didn't see it, but I imagined it vividly, and I smiled. He tried calling from 10 different numbers, tried emailing, DMing from old accounts, even messaging my cousin on Facebook asking where I was. I ignored them all. When the legal process officially began, he was furious. He contested everything. claimed I abandoned the marriage, accused me of stealing, even tried to get full custody because she's emotionally unstable. My lawyer handed over everything: documents, audio files, even the footage from the building's security cameras showing me pregnant and struggling up the stairs alone while he played video games. The judge didn't say much, but his face said enough. In the final ruling, I was granted full legal and physical custody of our daughter, a restraining order limiting Bryce's contact, and a court-mandated repayment plan for the fraudulent credit he racked up in my name. His rental lease was voided due to ID misuse. He also lost his job. Apparently, HR didn't love hearing that one of their employees used a pregnant spouse's identity to open accounts behind her back. Now, he's crashing on a friend's couch, posting cryptic Instagram stories about fake people and how loyalty is dead. And I'm here, holding my newborn daughter against my chest, watching the morning sun stretch across the window of our home, knowing that she'll never have to learn how to make herself small for a man's ego. He tried to control the story, but I rewrote the ending. He said I was crazy. He said I was dramatic. Turns out, I was just done. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who thought you never would, drop a 2 in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, subscribe. There's more where this came from.